We welcome you to Catholic Party for America. This is the Apostle of the Rocky Mountains, Father Pierre Jean de Smet, Part 2. I'm going to read you some parts from his letters on his experience with the Native American tribes up in the Rocky Mountains. Again, we welcome all the Catholic tribes to join us at Catholic Party for America. It's quite easy to go to the website. Just put a .com at the end of Catholic Party for America as it's spelled on the screen up there. And so let me read to you from Father Pierre Jean de Smet on letters on his experience. So then this is part 2 of hopefully an ongoing series on Father de Smet to get him more widely known and get this Catholic American history out there. So part 2, here we go. He's talking now about a chapel trunk he left among the Rocky Mountain tribes. To the chapel trunk I had left among the Rocky Mountain tribes at my departure from them, as an assurance of my promise to return to the mountains. For nearly a year they had carried it with the greatest care in all their expeditions and returned it to me intact, in the best state of preservation. I may here add a short statement of what occasioned my visit to these Indians. The Rocky Mountain tribes, the Flatheads, Gillespie's, Coeur d'Alenes, Kootenays, and others, had heard of the Savior and of his holy laws to mankind by means of a few Christian Iroquois from Canada, who had come to the mountains of Ingas among the Hudson Bay Company. We had finally settled among the above tribes. They had aroused the minds of the mountain Indians with a religious feeling to which they had been hitherto strangers. And in a council they resolved to send a deputation to St. Louis of some of their wisest men to obtain black robes, priests from the bishop. I have always looked upon it as a particular favor to have been appointed to accompany this deputation, and with pleasure I can bear witness that during the long and tedious traveling at that time of 1840, their conduct toward me was one continued act of kindness and of attention. After some 2 or 3 months' travel to appointed uh, uh, view uh, location in the plains of the Green River, we met great numbers of the above-mentioned tribes who had come hundreds of miles from their habitual hunting grounds to meet us and welcome us to their country. Their kindness, attention, and zeal exceeded my expectations. From the very start of my missionary operations, they listened with the utmost anxiety and earnestness to the holy word of God, and put in practice immediately what they were made to understand. In this first visit, I remained with the Indians about 3 months. They daily attended at the morning and evening prayers and instructions, which holy practice, as I learned, has never been discontinued among them. They keep the Lord's Day in highest veneration. As soon as it became practicable, they abandoned polygamy without the least ill will or trouble. I always remarked great love and attachment of the parents toward their children, great great regard for each other, for quarrels were of the rarest occurrence, and no stranger could come amongst them without meeting with a kind reception and finding hospitality. They were strictly honest towards one another and likewise towards strangers. Even any object found was carefully remitted to the chief, who proclaimed it aloud at the camping place to return it to the owner. My mission home was of necessity often left alone, but nothing was ever missed. My friends, the Kootenays, had a trading post on their lands provided with goods for their use. The trader, Mr. Burton, was sometimes absent for weeks or months. The Indians went in and served themselves according to their wants, replaced in furs and skins for the goods taken out. And upon the testimony of the trader, I use his words. His confidence in their honesty was never abused. Their moral conduct was admirable and commendable. Every attempt at seduction, either by young men or by adults, was punished with severe flogging. During my several years' intercourse and experience with these mountain Indians, I never heard of an adulterer. I had an adopted Indian brother named Moses, surnamed the Brave of the Braves. His exemplary conduct took pace with his renowned bravery, and he was generally looked up to and esteemed. I was with him when he called upon the chief, who had just performed his duty after his morning prayer, and as justice of peace in flogging a guilty young Nez Perce, who had recently arrived amongst them and was ignorant of their laws and customs. Moses took off his buffalo robe, exposed his bare back, shook hands with the judge, and stipulated himself to receive 25 well laid down lashes. I here interposed and inquired into the motive and cause of his action. He answered me with a smile equally admirable for his simplicity and sincerity. Father, the Nez Perce here present was whipped because he talked foolishly to a girl. My thoughts are sometimes bewildering and vexing. I have prayed to drive them from my mind and heart. I consoled him with a few words of advice and encouraged him to persevere manfully in the service of the Great Spirit, who would have pity on him and help him in his tribulations. And he was not flogged. As to agriculture and other manual labor work, he was easily introduced amongst them, and they set joyfully to work, as far as the few plows and other instruments we had would allow them. Each family had its field of wheat, its gardens of vegetables. Each mission was provided with a mill, carpenter, and blacksmith shop. I might here adduce many more characteristic traits of the mountain Indians. I shall rejoice if I have not exceeded the limit of my letter, and if in any way I have come up to your intention and expectation in these somewhat hurriedly written pages, please accept my goodwill in what I have the honor to address to you. With my best wishes and prayers, the deliberations you are about to assume with the welfare of the Indian tribe. So that is some of the things in his letter. I want to continue with it just to give you a little bit more. He continues. Permit me to add the following testimonies, confirming what I have said of the religious dispositions of the mountain Indians. In explorations and surveys of Governor Stevens for a railroad from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean, Volume 1, page 308, Captain John Mullen of said expedition writes, September 14th, 1853, when the guide and myself had reached their camp of the Flatheads, 3 or 4 men met us at the entrance and invited us to enter the lodge of the chief. They very kindly took care of our horses, unsaddling and watering them. As soon as the camp had heard of the arrival of white men amongst them, the principal men of the tribe congregated in the lodge of the chief. When they had all assembled, by a signal from the chief, they offered up a prayer. This astonished me. It was something for which I had not been prepared. Everyone was upon his knees in the most solemn and reverential manner, offered up a prayer to God. For a moment I asked myself, was I among Indians? Was I among those termed by everyone savages? I could scarcely realize it. To think that these men should be thus imbued, and so deeply too, with the principles of religion was to me overwhelming. From the late 1869 report of the Commissioners of the Indian Affairs to the Secretary of the Interior, I take an extract from McConley's letter. U.S. Indian Agent, page 254, speaking of the Flatheads and Penn de Orleans, says, these people possess strong religious feelings as the well-filled and commodious church of the Reverend Fathers of St. Ignatius Mission, on every Sabbath testifies. The missionary labors of the Reverend Fathers have not been in vain, for many of them are exemplary Christians. I may here remark that the labors of the Reverend Fathers have been very arduous and difficult. Poor and unaided, they have established their mission, built their church and school, and maintained themselves solely by their own exertion. Not only this, but they have been at the same time priest, physician, and benefactor to these tribes. Still more, in conjunction with the noble sisters of charity, they educate, clothe, and feed the orphans of these tribes without fee or reward. Without their aid and influence, the wrongs inflicted upon these people would long since have driven them to war. I give the above extract of McConley to draw your attention to these missions and take the liberty of recommending them to you, should the opportunity present itself. I have visited and traveled amongst most of the Indian tribes of the upper Missouri River and its tributaries and plains during the space of about 30 years. I am happy to be able to bear testimony that I have been on all occasions kindly received and entertained by them, and have ever found them attentive to religious instruction. It is my candid opinion that much good might have been, and can still be effected among the Indians if they are properly and justly dealt with by the whites. As was said in the part one about how the Indians got enraged and everything, and how the bad traders and people came up to them, give them weapons and whiskey, and worked them up into a hateful fury. And then our history books or movies call them savages. In reality, what we did to them and hurting them, we, the white people, were the savages. If the Army, the U.S. government, during those great so called Great Indian Wars, had a true care for the people, the Native Americans, to truly get them calmed down and get them back to thinking and to praying and find out what started it and bring in Father Desmet and his fellow missionaries who went to these tribes and set up these missions. Got them all together, the Father Desmet and his missionaries and Native American tribes, and just talked it out, settled things that way. And in another part of this letter, of the same letter, talks about a massacre that could have been totally avoidable. He writes in this letter to another Army officer about this. I quote, "An unpardonable offense, it appears, has been committed in the eyes of our civilized people by the Indians. They had repaired to the number of 2,000 to the appointed spot at the time fixed by the government agent to receive their annuities and presents. They waited several days for the commissioner to arrive. In the meantime, they ran out of provisions. Then a Mormon wagon train on its way to the territory of Utah came peacefully by the Indian camp. One of the party was dragging after him a lame cow hardly able to walk. A famished savage, out of pity for his wife, children, and perhaps also from compassion for the suffering animal, killed the cow and offered the Mormon double value for it in a horse and a mule. What does the Mormon do? Well, such an act was such an offer under such circumstances passes for very honest, very fair, and very polite in a wild country. So the Mormon refused the pro-offered exchange and went and filed a complaint with the commandant of Fort Laramie, which is in the neighborhood. Like the wolf who leaped upon the lamb to devour it, crying, "I know very well that you all hate me, and you shall pay for the rest." The illustrious commandant straightway sent out a young officer with 20 soldiers armed to the teeth with a cannon loaded with grape shot. Grape shot are iron balls stuffed into a cannon with powder. Think of a cannon with that as a giant shotgun, and grape shot as a giant load of buckshot. You should get the picture. He was absolutely determined to capture the so-called robber and make an example of him. The savages were astonished at the menacing turn that the affair of the cow, so frivolously begun, had taken. They begged the officer to take 1, 2, 3 horses in exchange, 100 times the value of the cow, if necessary. They were willing to pay for the cow so they could have food. The Mormons refused the payment. Now the army's refusing the payment. And what happens? They wished at any price to bury the affair, as they expressed it, that is, to arrange it peacefully and quietly, without giving up to him their brother, innocent according to their code. The officer was inflexible, refused all offers. He must absolutely have his prisoner. When the latter did not appear, he fired his cannon into the midst of the savages. The head chief, whom I knew well, the noblest heart of his nation, fell mortally wounded, and a number of his braves beside him. At this unexpected massacre of Indians sprang to arms, and letting fly hundreds of arrows from all sides, they instantly annihilated the aggressors and provocateurs. No, this is his letter to his family. My mistake. Forgive me. Um, this is his letter to his family about um, news from his friends and family of these Indian Native American tribes. Well, you in Europe believe this tale of a cow, and yet such is the origins of a fresh war of extermination upon the Indians which is to be carried out in the course of the present year. An army of 3 to 4,000 men is being got ready in Missouri at this moment to penetrate into the desert. A very large number of whites will lose their lives without a doubt, but in the end the savages will have to yield, for they are without firearms, without powder and lead, and without provisions. And that massacre is called Grattan Massacre because of the conduct of Lieutenant Grattan. And I'll post this online book of his writings and letters in the description below of Father Desmet. You can go through it and read it. It's only a partial book of it. I had to skip a few deals. It starts out, as a normal book, 1 2 3, then it skips ahead to page 1200 or so. So uh, that's well worth your read. Um, this is history they do not teach us in movie, literature, except this literature, and history class about the true reasons of the Indian Wars in Western America. They do not teach us that the Native Americans in the West, in the Rocky Mountains, and the plains, were, wait for it, wait for it, Catholic. So, to our Catholic brethren of the Native American tribes, who were friends and adopted family of Father Pierre Jean Desmet, please join us at Catholic Party for America. We will honor and uphold your history, your heritage, and promote it properly. It will keep the memory and history of Father Pierre Jean Desmet alive. And I have contacted the I think the editor of Catholicism.org that did the essay on Father Smith. See if there is any other essays like that on him. If not, I'll continue to find stuff in his book that I'm sharing from today. So again, please join Catholic Party for America. We are the new third party out there. If you want to restore America, renew it, rebirth it, and restore it back to the Christian founding fathers' vision and back to Jesus Christ and end all this corruption and nonsense going on, you know where to go. CatholicPartyForAmerica.com, as it's spelled up there. So join us. And we are in 26 states and one U.S. territory of Puerto Rico. God bless all our members. Stay warm, stay safe. God bless America. God save the Republic.